Previously.
You all know we're going to be in a very, very bad situation quite soon.
You do not want to inject carbon dioxide in your reservoir, and a nearby fault will start to reactivate because that will trigger small earthquakes. The earthquake is not a problem.
For God's sake, do not ever think about an explosion that will destroy anything. Absolutely not. However, it is even more dangerous that you might have an escape there.
So you briefly talked about the economic side, so let's touch on that for a moment. In 2023 alone, EU countries invested approximately 110 billion in renewable energy. Whereas, since 2018, only 4.5 billion has gone towards the entire CCS value chain. Prinos project is expected to store around 3 million tons of CO2 per year, which would amount to roughly 60 to 70 million tons by 2050. In contrast, achieving Europe's net zero goal by 2050 is projected to require CO2 storage of 7 gigatons of CO2 per year. Reports from the IEA and IPCC explain that CCS capacity must scale by 100 times to meet these targets. So given the scale gap, do you believe that projects like Prinos are stepping stones towards continental CCS infrastructure? Or are they destined to remain limited unless there's a radical shift in funding and policy priority?
Okay, that's interesting. Well, I think the first thing one needs to have in mind is it always takes two to tango.
Yeah.
We get the emitters who sell their product, their CO2, to the operators who store it. So you have a business that needs to work between those two. You can either push the emitters to store it, because otherwise they would just release it in atmosphere if it costs less. And on the other hand, you may fund the operators of storage so that they proceed with more projects for storing. Now, there is a mechanism which was firstly developed in the EU but now applies worldwide, the carbon tax. The idea is the following. For each single ton of CO2 that the factory produces, you need to pay a significant amount of money. Just to give you some understanding, as we speak, the number is of the order of 70 euros in Europe per ton. So, can you imagine of a big cement industry, for example, which might emit 1 or 2 millions of tons of CO2 per year, which can do nothing else for that, they need to pay a huge amount of money. So, it's the economy. As you remember the case with President Clinton, it's the economy stupid. It's a phrase that we keep using all the time. It's an all-time classic now. I apologize for the word. If the governments, if the EU decides to further pursue CCS, they will increase the carbon tax number. It will go up to 100 euros per ton. If it goes to 100, then the solution of storing that underground will be much more nice than what it used to be before. On the other hand, if you give some funding extra to the operators, then various stakeholders will get involved in being in developing that new industry. As of today, everybody knows it's crystal clear that the value will go, the price will go up. It will go significantly up exactly to apply pressure to the emitters to get connected to the storage system. At the same time, NERV has already received a very considerable amount of money as a funding in order for this operation to become viable. And this is what happens all around Europe. So it looks like the European Union, the Parliament, whoever might be responsible for that, checks all the time what is the balance between the pressure applied to the emitters through the carbon tax and the benefits of the storage operators with respect to funding. And this is how they're going to control the system. In my opinion, they will definitely push the emitters and favor the storage operators in order exactly to enlarge the interest, enhance the interest of stakeholders in CCS. Otherwise, you all know we're going to be in a very, very bad situation quite soon, I would say. Okay, in the next 30 years or 50 years, it's very close. 50 years is not a big amount of time.
Yeah, it's very close. So, constructing on what Dr. Gaganis said, this is the Norwegian model from Norway. In Norway, they were producing hydrocarbons, and then they decided that let's put some tax on the companies. The companies initially they used to pay the tax and they wouldn't care because they will just roll on the cost onto the customer. When the taxation became that large, then they decided we need to do something about it. And they were among the first pioneers that they decided to use their depleted gas fields as extra depleted gas fields as pore volume to store CO2. If I'm not mistaken, Ekofisk works for 30 years now for CO2 in Norway. So they have a lot of technology in CO2 and they're doing it. And the reason why they did it is the green taxation, what Dr. Gaganis thoroughly explained. Okay, now with respect to Prinos being as a stepping stone, it is the first southeastern European project. So we will learn from it. It has all the positive things, well-studied field, depleted, lots of data to analyze, could prove a concept, but again, Prinos alone is not enough. We will need to seek more reservoirs, we will need to seek more, because as the industry shifts, the taxation shifts also, so taxes will just follow where the companies go. So it's a matter of time of these taxations to become higher, and we need to move fast because these companies will, of course, pay the taxes, but then it will go on the customer, us. So how will we feel that? Everything will go up. Everything. Energy will go up. Construction will go up. Everything will go up. So we need to do something about now, not, let's say, a few years later. Okay, so we can use Prinos and learn, construct a benchmark, if you like, for the area. And then, learning with Prinos, we will, at the time, we will be active in finding new depleted reservoirs or even new geological structure. That's it.
Thank you. So, although the EU climate policy increasingly supports both clean hydrogen and carbon capture and storage, in practice, funding and attention often swing towards one or the other. Is there synergy between hydrogen and CO2 storage, or do they risk cannibalizing each other in policy and investment terms, especially if hydrogen becomes the bigger political favorite at some point?
Oops. If I may stay with the technical aspects of that question rather than the economic, because I'm not an expert in economics and politics. So I think that the first thing we need to have in mind is some major differences between the two kinds of projects. CO2 is about to be stored in the subsurface forever, eternally. We store it there once and it needs to stay there for the next 1,000, 5,000 years or so. On the other hand, talking about hydrogen storage, we need to temporarily store the hydrogen. We produce the hydrogen using green energy, for example, taking advantage of the sunlight during the summer. We get photovoltaic panels, get electricity, use it to generate hydrogen, and then we store it at the subsurface so that in the winter we can bring it back. So we are talking about reservoirs which will be filled and emptied all the time, probably on a yearly basis. Therefore, I think that it's not the same subsurface formations which can serve both tasks. We also keep in mind that keeping hydrocarbons or CO2 in a reservoir is easier than storing hydrogen. And the reason is, once again, the physical properties of hydrogen. The hydrogen molecule is extremely small and it can escape much easier than oil, natural gas, or CO2 can. So, as far as I am concerned, for this reason, most researchers, because still we are looking for that, what they suggest is not using classic reservoirs for storing hydrogen, but preferring salt domes. In fact, we are talking about huge layers of very big thickness made of salt-like sediments, salt-like layers, within which we can inject water, wash out the area, generate a caving, if I may say, and then store hydrogen into that. So that they inject it and then they take it back. So I think that technically there is those two processes are not rivaling and definitely not cannibalizing each other. To my extent, I don't know if Professor Sarris has anything to add of that, because as I said,
this is a pure geomechanical problem.
exactly. So I'm pretty sure he's got the word.
Okay, let's don't blame it only on the hydrogen. Let us say one thing. It does have some similarities in terms of you're using the same geomechanical models. Yeah. We don't have anything else. So either you store hydrogen or you store carbon dioxide. You use the same geomechanics. You use the same modeling for estimating the pressure. You use the same wells, pipelines, platforms, all the things that you have in the industry for hydrocarbons. You use it for both carbon dioxide injection and hydrogen storage. Okay, that's the core. But that's it up to that. Aside that, what Dr. Gaganis said, a lot of research is devoted in hydrogen, on how to store it, because the basic principle is carbon dioxide, you store it for permanent stay. Hydrogen, you store it and then you have to retrieve it back. It is used to balance grid problems, okay? Because with these renewables now that we have, a big balance of the energy demand is supplied from renewables. This creates issues on the grid. So they thought about, what if we use some of that excess energy that is created from the renewables and use a factor of electrolysis. Electrolysis is what? You just break down the molecule of water. Oxygen is released in the atmosphere so you can improve the quality of the air, and then you get hydrogen as a fuel to burn. But in that much quantities, you need to store it because you don't need it actually, and then you need to retrieve it back when you will have shortages. Now, in principle, it is better to burn down hydrogen that comes, it's not like a fossil fuel. Therefore, both, they help into this energy transition. Okay, so you burn hydrogen, then it helps in the energy transition. If you produce the same amount of energy with hydrogen that comes from electrolysis, from energy that was excess, that you're doing savings actually. So in terms of geomechanics, they have similarities, but definitely they don't cannibalize, and they work side by side in the energy transition that we're trying to do. The only thing that I can think of those two working together is when you use both. We call it blue hydrogen. The blue hydrogen is when you inject carbon dioxide with hydrogen, but I'm not sure how that thing works, whether you may be able to recover the hydrogen with the carbon dioxide because you mix them and you put them in the subsurface together. I'm not sure if it can be retrieved, or what is the reason why they inject hydrogen with carbon dioxide together to make the blue hydrogen. So this is something like a new technology which we need to upgrade ourselves also.
Wonderful. Okay, now, shifting our focus towards Greece. Greece sits in a very geopolitically sensitive corridor. Now, with growing interest from investors, EU decarbonization, and regional natural gas deals, could this expansion of CO2 storage position Greece as more than just a transit hub, and potentially as a carbon sink for southeastern Europe? And what would it take?
Well, if I may say, first of all, I would avoid the term carbon sink because it sounds quite it just gives a negative aspect, okay? Although CCS should always leave us something positive in our mind, okay? If I may say so. Well, I don't really know what's going to happen, and definitely this has to do, as always, with politics and economy. Okay. I do know that Enner, for example, who has already been the very first one to work in Southeast Europe to develop Prinos, they are already looking for alternative places to store for getting new exploration rights. In other words, they are not just, let's make some money out of that and disappear out of the map on the next day. No, they're insisting on that. At the same time, in Italy, northern Italy, close to Ravenna city, we got, probably you have heard about that, we got another big reservoir where CO2 is stored. As a result, it looks like those 2 points, which of course are not enough to store the whole amount of CO2 produced in all that area, they can still act as initiatives, and probably we could be able to further develop this business and come up with a hub. However, we should also have in mind one more restricting factor, which is transportation. Greece has an advantage, the sea. It is surrounded by sea, which means that CO2 can be transported with ships, long ships. And this definitely lowers the cost very much. On the other hand, if it would be just in the mainland, this would suggest that we would need pipelines, long pipelines. And pipelines are not easy at all to develop. They cost a fortune, okay? There are issues about security, issues about politics, probably issues about the social acceptance of projects like this one. So at this point, I think Greece does have a benefit exactly due to the seashore line around that. Let's hope that we will take advantage of that, and in just very few years from now, we will be happy to say that yes, we are the guys that are leading the CCS front in the Southeast Europe.
And maybe perhaps new collaborations.
Yep.
Okay, great. So we've reached our final question for this evening. And this one calls for a broader projection than for Greece. As Cyprus does not currently have a readily available infrastructure or current producing fields that would serve as carbon storage reservoirs, it is not for the time being an imminent prospect for carbon storage. Nevertheless, recent agreements for the development of fields in Block 6, Block 12, and possible drilling advancements in Block 5 make the idea of future CCS investments in the country less abstract. So what is your opinion on Cyprus's potential in carbon capture and storage with the information available to us at this moment?
Well, first of all, let me clearly explain that the locals are much more expert than myself to provide an answer, okay? The only thing that I could add, without taking into account that we're talking about Cyprus itself, since I don't have any specific information, is the fact that the fields you mentioned are new, okay? They're green fields, not mature ones, which means that they will be producing hydrocarbons for the next 30, 40, or 50 years, hopefully. So, what's going to be the day that we will consider converting them into CCS project? I think there won't be time by that. And by that time, we'll have already developed other areas like aquifers. This is my first reaction, but as I said before, please don't shoot the messenger, okay? I'm not an expert on that. Probably Professor Sarris can provide more information because he's a local after all and an expert on this subject.
So that's a very interesting question, how CCS can be applied in Cyprus. First of all, we can start this discussion by analyzing the types of rocks. You can either do carbon dioxide injection either onshore or offshore. As you may all be aware, Cyprus is a special igneous rock, belongs into the family of igneous rocks, and it's an ophiolite. Okay, so on Mount Rhodos there are a lot of mafic and ultramafic rocks that are rich in magnesium and iron, which is considered to be good absorbers of carbon dioxide. However, I wouldn't see any possibility of starting a CCS project on Mount Rhodos, despite the fact that in other countries of the EU they're trying to store carbon dioxide in basaltic rocks. Okay, so I do not think, let's exclude that Cyprus onshore will be considered as a storage site anywhere. Okay, in any rate, onshore we do have nice structures, sedimentary structures, but they cannot hold either volume or pressure. So onshore is out of the question. Now we go offshore. Offshore we have proven reserves. In order for you to start a project in carbon dioxide, as we said, with the example of Prinos, that's why everybody has the example of Prinos, they have infrastructure. Here we do not have infrastructure. When we say infrastructure, we also mean a compression unit where it will convert carbon dioxide gas into supercritical form. We do not have any of that, but that can easily be constructed. However, you need a reservoir. Our reservoirs are not mature. In a matter of fact, they're still under development. However, there have been reservoirs, not depleted. Depleted is a very wrong terminology in this case, but dry. They have drilled and they have found something that is dry. So first thing first, we need to see the reason why that structure that showed beautifully behind geophysical interpretation that it doesn't have, has traces. Where did it go? Is it a closed structure, or does it have fractures, or is it related with faults, and then the natural gas that was supposed to be in the reservoir has migrated somewhere else? So you see, that raises the risk of escape. So we need to, we do have reservoirs that are dry from gas. We could use those, but a lot of salt tectonics has to be analyzed. Why? One thing I think that skipped our attention to say about Prinos is that on top of the Prinos structure, it has more than 500 meters evaporites. Those evaporites, even if breached, they have the so-called self-healing capacity. So it will break and then it will self-heal itself because salt has creep mechanical behavior. So if it breaks, it will self-heal and it will not find its way in 500 meters above. Forget about it. It can propagate maybe 1, 3, I would say at best 10 meters in the cap. Forget about it. Doesn't move. However, the salt tectonics in this regime, not in Prinos Cavalla, but down here, are more harsh. This means that tectonic events, they're pushing the cap rocks in very peculiar ways, which we do not know how they behave. So there is a lot of research that has to be done with respect to the salt tectonics and see whether these tectonic forces caused the further migration of the natural gas to some other structures. At first, it appears to be that they're not closed. That's why it migrated. So the first gold rule in CO2 sequestration is closed structure. So the only feasible structure that I would see offshore is, I don't want to go into details, but there is a very small possibility that we can start, but it needs a lot of investment and it needs a lot of study before we go there. In the case of Prinos, they were like lucky, if I may say so this way, because they had tons of data to analyze. It was a reservoir that was everything there is to know. They have it. So here we still develop. We still need to know. I wouldn't see any feasibility of carbon dioxide in Cyprus earlier than 20 years from now. Earlier, at least 20 years from now and late. But you never know. If there are synergies like a synergy between Egypt and Israel, or any other synergies in the area, that might raise interest in the operators and start thinking, okay, we have the reservoir now, it's dry. What am I going to do about it? Deliver the exploration license back to the hydrocarbon service, or maybe turn it into something profitable, like what Energean thought in Prinos. So it's totally up to the operator to start thinking, making carbon dioxide injection. And if you ask me, that will not trigger political issues or instabilities in the region. Why? Everybody's interested not to make money from energy resources. Like, if you have oil, you will not take it. You will not explore. You will not produce, or natural gas. But if you say we're about to start injecting carbon dioxide, nobody would care, if you ask. So a new business may start without any political interventions or even issues with our neighbors.
Please.
Question?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
The first is the carbon capture. Can they feed it somehow and turn it into a solid form?
As far as I am concerned, Iceland is working on that because they don't have sedimentary basins to store the CO2, and they are working on mineralization. This is a term we use, mineralization of the CO2, direct conversion of the gas CO2 into a mineral, in other words, without even burying it down. But as far as I am concerned, they have been successful. The idea is successful, but the TRL level, the technical readiness level of this technology is extremely low, which means that if it can be scaled to an industry big scale, it will still take a lot of time. Okay.
The question is it a good idea if they turn it into a solid form to make fertilizer for trees?
Oh, sorry, wait a minute. I think that what you're talking about in this case is not just getting rid of the CO2, but utilizing CO2 to make something useful rather than storing it. So, okay, correct. So, I would say that we have been using this evening the CCS term, carbon capture and storage. Strictly speaking, the term is CCUS. Carbon capture, utilization, and storage, where utilization means do anything with the CO2 which will end up with new useful products such as fertilizers, for example. So definitely this is a good idea. Of course, one could argue, just a moment, that you need energy to revive CO2 and to convert it to something useful. Of course we can, but we're going to use renewables. That's the idea. So you won't produce more CO2 in order to get rid of CO2. This is the utilization, and definitely people are working on that.
So also building on that, the technological readiness level of that is we are on the proof of concept yet, so it's very low. And we talk about how much volume. We talk about here in the injection, like 3 million tons a year. You cannot utilize 3 million tons a year constructing bricks or constructing whatever you can make it. Of course, in principle, I mean, the numbers do not add up. So the need here is to store large volumes of carbon dioxide. Now, if you find a repurpose, because carbon dioxide is what? It's a waste, actually. It's a byproduct of the combustion process. So we produce waste. The new circular economy principle is get your waste and create something new. That's where they're basing that. So you get carbon dioxide, which is waste, and you find a new purpose for reusing it. But definitely it will not solve the problem. It's going to be only one small fraction of that. But still, that can create a business opportunity for investors. And in doing so, especially in the European Union, whatever we do in the companies, we need to minimize the carbon footprint. So if I am going to start a process that I will require energy, it means I am emitting also what I'm trying to do must not exceed a certain threshold of carbon footprint. This means what? Because handling this carbon dioxide waste into repurposing it to be something new, you will make more carbon dioxide than what you're trying to save. So this makes it not feasible. That's why. But if you use renewables to do that, you're pretty much independent of it. So you can prove that you can minimize the carbon footprint. However, then, how much volume you can take care in a process like that? at the order of 3 million tons a year? Definitely not. So the big question here is, first of all, to set the threshold, how much emissions we have. So we go to very big industries, cement factories, electricity producers, and so on, and we measure how much they emit when they are in full operation. And then we extrapolate, and we know by the end of the year how much carbon dioxide was emitted by these industries. And that's how the number of the 3 million expanding to 6 eventually per year comes for Prinos. So eventually we need to find a very big space. That's why aquifers and reservoirs qualify as storage facilities for the large volumes.
Before the question, if I take just a couple of words, thank you very much for the invitation. But I need also to congratulate you, not only for your work, generally speaking, for the SSP chapter, but the preparation for this event today has been great from those people. They act as professionals. And honestly, I envy you because I wasn't like you when I was at your age. Okay? So, just a big bravo for your work.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We try to do the best with our team. Dr. Sarris, Dr. Gaganis, thank you very much. It was a wonderful discussion. It was a pleasure to have you.